The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Welcome to Pediatric Perspectives, where we are looking at children's health challenges from a different perspective, one that includes critical thinking. My guest today, back from a recent episode that you should absolutely go watch if you haven't seen it, Dr. Cammy Benton. Welcome back, Cammy. That episode on PANS was just incredible, and that led to the need for this session we're going to have, which is going to be nervous system regulation in children. Whether or not your child has a PANS or PANDAS diagnosis, this is a really important topic. So many of our kids are dysregulated, right?
Oh gosh, this is even before the pans. My awareness of pans was even a thing. Is watching my own kids navigate through the school systems, and unfortunately, admittedly, too much screen time. We're have this mass experiment with our children with social media and telephones. Like that was not like it was back in our day. Like it was. It's a whole new thing. It's a whole brave new world that we have to navigate with our children, and watching them experience their own it's like their nervous system, the dysregulation of their nervous system, cued me in also to my own patients in my practice and understanding how social media can impact that. I believe so. The lighting in schools, like the fluorescent lighting, has this little flicker that most people don't really see, but it's for sensitive people. It can really mess with your mind, literally, but also with your cortisol levels. The lack of time outdoors. Outdoors
Yeah.
is like
I,
medicine, nature's medicine, and they're not getting it. They have a nature deficiency these
a
days.
nature deficiency. Yeah, I had a excess stress trigger for me that just had me like basically almost in a shutdown. I was in a flight for too long. And I think our kids are, if they're on video games all the time, and then there's so many other things that we'll touch on and touched on in that last episode. But for a foundational understanding, because this really ended up helping me with my own recovery from excessive stress and everything that led to. Can you explain the autonomic nervous system and vagal tone for, simplistically for parents? Because I think that's has to be addressed, right?
Right. So we have, imagine you have the sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight. So that's when you're running from the symbolic tiger, whatever that is in your world. And so when you're running from that tiger, you need to run. You need the blood to go to your extremities. And that it doesn't really matter if you have a steak sitting in your stomach or food to digest, you've got to survive. So when you are in fight or flight, your blood goes here and away from your intestinal tract, and so your food does not digest as well, and you actually end up, just as an aside, is you end up with higher rates of SIBO. It's a small intestinal bacterial disorder. It's like an overgrowth, and where you get bloating and you don't digest your food. For people who have severe fight or flight, they end up with all these GI issues or stomach issues related to that. Your vagus nerve actually comes from your brain and goes down around your carotids. It innervates your tongue, goes around your esophagus, your heart, and all through your intestinal tract. So that's where you are, it's your rest and digest. So there is no tiger chasing you. So you can have your lovely brunch and digest your meal. That's all good. But our kids are not in that fight and in that rest and digest mode. Like we're on the go. And I honestly even I'm convinced that travel teams are in this society, it's contributing to the fight or flight of most kids because the level of sports commitment that they have is not every student is able to go at that speed 5 days a week, and having to do homework at night, lack of sleep. A lot of kids are struggling even from that. It seems like, oh, my kids are great. They're doing all these sports, but really they have no time to rest and do nothing. Boredom is actually medicine for kids too, and they're not having enough time to be bored.
Huh, that is a very good point. What does a dysregulated nervous system look like?
It's where you are unable to just sit and be. Yeah, where
Mm.
you are able, it's like the kids who can't make it. So it's also presents differently in young kids versus older kids and adults. So it's the meltdowns when you try to change environments, like they just don't change is a struggle for them. Calming, like the fight. Have you ever been like the wired and tired where you're just running and running and you want to go to sleep but you can't go to sleep? Yeah,
Count me in on that.
right. So it's that kid running circles and rubbing their eyes at the same time. Uh,
Mhm.
can't go to sleep or they wake up frequently. Or even like I remember when my oldest, if I did not put them to bed at like 5 or 5:30 in the evening to go to sleep for the night, they'd wake up every 3 or 4 hours and they wouldn't sleep as long, you know, if I put them at 6 or 7. But if I put them at 5 or 5:30, they'd sleep for 13 hours straight and they felt better. So it's that even down to how their sleep patterns are, how long they sleep. A lot of kids will present with tummy aches. Uh, of course, it makes sense, right? If I've already told you the vagus nerve innervates all that stuff in your stomach, and these kids have tummy aches, constipation, or diarrhea, or irritable bowel syndrome type things. So that could be a presentation of stress or dysregulated nervous system in a younger kid, up to even actually any age can actually have that. But in your little kids, they can't say, "Oh, I'm stressed out, mommy." Like they just like, "Oh, my tummy hurts every single day," or every time they're going into school, "Oh, my tummy hurts." That's
Mm.
anxiety showing up through their body.
I just had an aha. It feels like, I don't know why I never thought of this before. Everybody's stressed out. The world today is not designed for how we were built, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
basically, we're all stressed out to some degree or another, unless you're really zen and meditating and doing all the right things for everything we've been talking about. We're all stressed out. And
Right.
so we need a reset and we need to focus and continually work on getting more into parasympathetic. I know I'm sympathetic dominant, always have been. How does that differ based on the age of the kid? What kind of things can you do? Because it sounds like, in a way, we all have to calm down. How do you do that in an infant versus, say, a preschooler versus a school age kid?
Regardless of age, regardless of what the source of stress is, the parent comes first in regulating the nervous system because you cannot regulate the nervous system of any child if you yourself are dysregulated. That's number one. And actually, I learned that because my oldest child, she was my kid that I was in a very stressful environment, marriage, work, everything. And she was a stressful kid. And I told my friend, I was like, "Oh, she's like Forrest, like she's finally old enough to get her some therapy. I've got to get her some therapy." And my friend was like, "You've got to actually work on yourself first." And I'm like, gasp. But
Friends.
I don't have a problem. And she's like, "You have to deal with your nervous system first." And that hurt my feelings. But then I was like, okay. So I went and started working on my own nervous system. I did somatic work. And suddenly within a couple months that my 4-year-old was hugging me. She could sit on my lap.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like,
Just
it was
describe somatic
amazing.
work. Sorry to interrupt you, but when you said you
Somatic
did
work,
somatic work.
soma is the body. Soma is the word for body. And so somatic work, there's all kinds of forms out there, but it's like, where are you feeling stress right now? Oh, what's in your chest? What color is it? Does it have a shape? Does it have a feeling to it? And you watch it move through your body. So it's just an example, or imagining a white light filling in your body. And
Mm.
is it going everywhere? Is there a blockage where it doesn't go? So that's like kind of a form of somatic therapy that you start learning how to become more in tune to your body. A lot of us are dissociated. Dissociated means that like we're not even aware of what our body is doing. Like we don't even, some people you will even see as a patient, they're like, "Oh yeah, I feel fine," but they have like a whole bunch of issues going on with their body. You're like, "There's no way you're fine." Or there's some people who are very oversensitive somatically, and they have every symptom in the book throughout their whole body. So that's the somatic nature. So it's interesting when I started doing Joe Dispenza work, like meditation, and I would try to imagine this light going in. I could see my body over to the right of me. I couldn't actually put the light into my body and have it go down. It was over there. That tells you how dysregulated I was. And
Wow.
right. So we have to help ourselves first as
Yeah.
parents.
So I was assisted through coaching and because I was not a meditator, so for an active fight or flight person, I was a perfect basket case for dysregulation. And by learning breathing techniques and some meditation, some simple things, and I got some body work that was helpful too. It made a huge difference. I'm interested in you sharing because I think you have worked with kids on this. What are some of the specific things you've done that you found to be really helpful?
So once the parent is addressing their nervous system, then the parent taking time to walk with the kid out in the woods. So Japan has a national forest, like health place, South Korea. So in Asia, they're aware of the science of trees and how it impacts our nervous system and our immune systems, actually. So literally going to a park and walking through the woods, believe it or not, that literally has science to back it up. It lowers your cortisol levels. It improves your heart rate variability, which I'll get into that, I'm sure, in a minute with heart math. The heart rate variability improves, your cortisol levels go down, blood pressure and pulse goes down when you are out in the woods. So taking your children out, or baby, or it doesn't matter what age, go for a walk outside, ideally, if you can, barefoot, because there's also studies to show how important it is to be barefoot outside. Electromagnetically, this has physiologic benefits to your body. It's not just being a hippie, which I am, but it's not just about being a hippie. It is like literally it's medicine. The earth is medicine for our feet. So take them for walks, replace your lights in the bedroom with a red light, maybe for at night, to have red light before you go to bed, avoiding the bright lights, the LED lights, any kind of blue light from your computer or phone screens. That actually interferes with a lot of the hormones in your brain to not allow you to fall asleep as easily. Those are things that everyone should be doing anyway. And then
Good point.
as kids are old enough, then actually practicing breath work with them and making sure that their exhale is longer than their inhale. So the inhale reflects the sympathetic nervous system. Why you got to breathe in to run from that tiger? Exhales, relax. And actually, let's even do a fun little breath work. Everyone out there, we're just push your feet on the ground and close your eyes. And we're going to inhale for a count of 5 and exhale for a count of 7. So you're going to inhale 3, 4, 5, and exhale 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we're going to do this 2 more times. Inhale for a count of 5, 3, 4, 5, and exhale for a count of 7. Exhale, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and one more. Inhale for a count of 5, 3, 4, 5, and exhale for a count of 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So most people, if that alone can just help bring down how you feel. And so I have patients come in and they like really stressed out. And I'm like, just breathe. Or some people do box breathing. You hold in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, out for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4. It's a little more complicated for your young ones, but the young ones can actually easily do an inhale and an exhale and not worry about it. And actually, I actually have these right here. This is called NOW. Um, they are the little speakers, and you can hold them in your hands, and it's a 3-minute meditation, and it has toning. So you can actually feel the vibration of the toning in each of the speakers, and they don't do it at the same time. So it helps people like me and you, Dr. Paul, that we probably have our brains going 1,000 miles per minute, and we're like, we can't get our brains quiet. Like
Mhm.
your brains are not really meant to be quiet unless you are like a master meditator, like a monk in the cave or something like that. Our brains are, it's natural for us to have thoughts. But
Yeah.
people like us that are high energy, that go, 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 that was like, oh, I can do a 3-minute meditation. And I will tell you this, the first time I even got them, I didn't last the 3 minutes without trying to look at the time. Like, when is this over? So this thing, like, it's literally that bad. That was before I went to Joe Dispenza. And so things like this can help people. That's very quick. Doing the breath work for a minute a couple times a
Mhm.
day. So I would do the breath work first thing in the morning before I got to work, get home from work, before dinner, before bed. And just that little minute of breath work for kids is feasible. And you can actually bring their nervous system right down
Wow.
as too.
Thank you. Even the great Cammy Benton does breath work every day. Look at that. And maybe that's why you look so at peace and calm, and yeah. Thank you for
Before I
sharing that.
meditated, it wasn't that way. I was a hot mess
Yeah.
before I started meditating.
Thank you for taking us through the breath work, because it is that simple and it is that powerful. One thing I added to it, because I think it just helped me turn my brain off, was as I was breathing in, I breathe in love. I just find that love is something I can identify with and feel, and then when I breathe out what I don't want. Usually it's stress or fear or anxiety, whatever you're going through that's keeping you maybe stressed or stuck. You can just release it. And that kept my mind busy enough to really bring in that love or light, and release whatever's messing me up. Yeah, but thank you for walking us through that breath work. It's probably my favorite thing we've done here in a long time.
There's why some people do the body scans too. They'll like you'll start with your toes, and there's apps like the Calm app. There's other apps that will walk you through your body as you go up. So that way, there's active meditations for people like us. I did do transcendental meditation training, and that one drove me nuts. Like I had to say the same word over and over again in my head. And I was like,
Mm,
so not every meditation's for everyone. And for some
gotcha.
people, meditation could be yoga, it could be gardening, it could be cycling, running. Like meditations don't have to be still. Like they can be very kinetic and
Hmm.
actually get the results that you want as well. Just being aware that I would say the people who are, I would say, adrenaline junkies. Um, I would urge you, adrenaline junkies, to actually do something non-running or non-aerobic to actually also calm down your nervous system. Because some people are running to avoid feeling their feelings too. So
Gotcha.
I've actually found that in some of my patients.
Yeah. And you touched on it briefly earlier, but for kids, just having that unstructured time where they can just be quiet. Obviously, that doesn't mean screens,
Right.
right? They just need to
No
have,
electronics. They need to be kick them outside. Back in the day, our parents said, "Go run outside. Don't come back until it's dark."
yeah, that was
These
how I
days,
grew up.
these days it's hard. You like have to like force your kids outside, like be outside. Like they act like you're killing them or something like
I
that.
know. So, forest bathing, being outside, so good. What other tips do you have for us dysregulated individuals and our children?
There's music is important to recognize. There's a whole thing which I'm not a music whiz at all. I just love music. You feel music, but I wish my husband were here to explain it better. But apparently, music used to be set at 432 hertz, and that's like Mozart and Bach. And Bach, Rockefeller. I have not like dove down to confirm this is true, but in a documentary, I was watching how Rockefeller actually and his people shifted the musical baseline. I guess I don't even know what it's called, to like 436 hertz or something like that as the standard for musicians, and it's off of that sacred like frequency. So there's a frequency to music. And if you're listening to like really negative lyrics and harsh music, it's going to, even if you love it, even if you're like, yeah, this is great, it has a different impact on your nervous system compared to music that is at the 432 hertz level. Now, it doesn't mean you have to listen to classical music. There's a lot of music that actually has really good vibes to it. The vibes are actually literally the vibrations that you're affected by in your environment. So music really does matter. Uh, People actually around you matter. And that's something I have to really say is that if you are really in a dangerous situation, if you are truly in an abusive home, you're never going to be regulated. You can't be regulated. And that's what I want to make sure that people also don't spiritually bypass themselves with this.
Mm,
You can meditate all you want, but if you have an abusive spouse or an abusive parent, there's no escaping that. Like you can't override that. Now what you can do is do your best to regulate yourself as much as possible, but ignoring the fact that there could be someone abusive in your environment is not going to do you any good either. I just have to throw that out there because
yeah.
some people really are like not in safe environments.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. It's happened too when I was in practice. Certain teachers were a really poor fit for a given child. This wasn't
Mhm.
common, but it happened several times. And once I identified that that was the issue, or we identified it together with the parent, then it was time to move, right? You just have to get a different classroom, and poof, most of the issues went away. It was just, that speaks to that, you know, emotional mental abuse that can happen. It's not just physical or sexual. Any kind of abuse is just disrupts this piece that we're trying to create. So summarize, we're running out of time. Summarize for our viewers, what does a nervous system literate household look like?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be limited screen times for children. Some would argue no screen time. Obviously, I really do think that would be the best thing for everyone is to not have any screen time. That
Mhm.
being said, we live in a world with tons of screen time everywhere. So making sure you have like proper screen time limits on your kids' electronics, which this day and age is hard. Like some kids have watches, they have the phones, they have their laptop, the iPads. So it is like herding cats trying to get rid of, try not to have your kids have so many options for electronics. They don't need that many. And we have one TV in the whole house. We don't allow TVs in anyone's room. Of course, that being said, now that they don't really need TVs the way things are going, but parents should not have a TV in their bedroom either to model that behavior. I would say no screen time like within 2 hours of going to bed, and encourage people to like go for an evening walk, outside, maybe read, maybe have softer incandescent lights, avoid the LED lights, avoid fluorescent lighting, having a red light in the room if you have, especially if you have someone who has trouble falling asleep. In the morning, the first thing you do, you don't get on your cell phone, you don't get on don't turn, just turn off the news. Like there should be no news allowed in the house, in my opinion. But go outside barefoot and feel the sun on your skin. If you can sit there for 5 or 10 minutes and do your breath work outside, that's going to be the best start to your day. Before you do, obviously, I have to go to the bathroom. Before you do anything else, go sit outside. And really teaching your kids that simple breath work. And then at the end of the day, I really love before I go to bed, writing your daily gratitude.
Mm.
Love and gratitude are the top two things you can do to bring in a whole different level of sleep. So when you go to bed, now, and what, especially for anyone like me at all, my brain is very active. You can't just lay in bed and say, "Oh God, I'm thankful for la la la." Why? Because we have monkey brain, and you'll end up on something else before you ever get to the third. So I recommend you get a pen and a piece of paper, old school, and write it down. There's really something to that brain connection to your hand, actually handwriting that gratitude down. And I encourage people to not have the same things every single day. Thankful for my family, for my house, for this country, whatever. That can get very just old. So what I recommend is that you really start digging into what happened today. What am I thankful for that is so different than every other day? Why? Because that's going to wire you to looking for things to be grateful for each day. So suddenly you're like, oh, I can write that on my paper tonight. Then you're going to be looking for really the miracles that are all around us. And that's what when you're in fight or flight, you're not looking for miracles. You're not looking for kindness. You're looking for survival. You're looking to make sure that you're not going to be eaten by that proverbial tiger. So if you can actually really make the gratitude part of your practice, then you're going to be looking for like, oh, look how nice that person was to me at the gas station. Oh, look at that little flower on the side of the road. Oh, look, the leaves are changing. You start noticing the things around you. And it's that being in the present moment that is going to shift your whole nervous system into realizing, oh, I'm really not about to be killed right now. And that creates a whole big shift on your nervous system. So handwriting at least three things you're grateful for, along with the breath work, love and gratitude, community, being, some of us are more hermit. I've actually realized I'm more of a hermit than I was an extrovert. I thought I was an extrovert. It would just stress me out. So like accepting who I am as more of a hermit and that I am okay alone. And some people need a more alone time. And looking for things that you're escaping into It could be like for me, I'm a workaholic by nature. So realizing, oh, I am working too much. Am I avoiding something? And bringing it back into the present moment and avoiding escapism. The escapism is
Mm.
going to be your TV, your social media, news, exercise, work, not doing things out of escapism, but being in the present moment, doing it actually for the sake of being who you really are, being authentic and who you are, whatever that means.
That's beautiful, Cami. This has been a master class on how we should live life. I want you to have the last word because what you just said could be the last word. It was beautiful, but if there's anything else on your heart, this is beautiful. I think we need to move as a society, as medical systems. We need to move towards um, this nervous system health being prioritized, and we've just neglected both spiritual, emotional, mental. We always just focus on symptom control, physical, and this is such a big part of who we are and becoming who we need to be.
I would say in general is recognizing that we're in a modern world, that unless you're ready to move into a commune, that we have to learn how to adapt to that modern world by bringing in the wisdom from the ancient world. And that could mean looking for communities that provide rites of passage, because we don't really honor the rites of passage anymore. So like my husband is part of Sons and Sages in North Carolina, where they help boys at the age of 13 and up go through rites of passage, and so that way they can learn who they really are. We're not going to learn who we really are being stuck in some electronic world matrix thing. How we learn who we are is by communing with nature in the best way possible, being in community with each other, learning how to be authentic, being in a balanced nervous system. If we're in a balanced nervous system, things just come more easily. And if things are like, if you're like constantly, wow, this is hard, this is hard, this is hard, there's consider that the hard things are there to help you evolve and become a better person. If
Mhm.
you're not evolving through those hard things, then you're going to be forever stuck in those hard things, because those hard things are there to help you learn how to become, to overcome it. And that was like, I feel like the first 50 years of my life was like overcoming that.
This
When
is
I
hard.
finally realized, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I need to evolve with this. And since I've learned, done all this breath work and a lot of this other spiritual medicine, which I do offer for my patients as well, is now my life is bringing in a lot of grace and ease to it, because then when I do see the hard things, I see it as a gift, and I see it
Mm.
as a something to learn from, and it's shifting that perspective. And believe me, y'all can make assumptions about me all you want. I've had some really hard stuff in my life, and that really did it dysregulated my nervous system. And the gift was that I was inspired to re-regulate my nervous system. And so it is a gift. It is absolute a gift. And I invite all of you who are struggling or having really hard times out there is to find someone to help you regulate your nervous system, because everything is connected. Your vagus nerve is like, so it is, that is your rest and digest. It's oversimplifying. Really, that's your peace, that's your gratitude. The sympathetic nervous system is there to help us when the time is right, to run when there is something to run from. But if we feel like we're constantly running, then how can we get you out of that into a safer environment? We have Lynn Akruri. He has allinparent.com. He helps parents that have children with complex medical needs to help guide them into their own nervous system regulation, because he realized, because he had the Autism Secrets podcast. So he realized, oh my gosh, all this is about the nervous system. So there are people out there that are helping people navigate the nervous system, from somatic work, EMDR. Internal family systems is one of my favorite forms of therapy. If our government could invest all this money into these forms of therapy, that would help. The medical system would not need as much.
So powerful. Thank you, Cami. Um, what you've shared, they're all simple, doable things. You
Mhm.
just have to do them, right? And that last piece, thank you for that, because so many are struggling out there. And when you can flip the script and say, this is happening for me, not to me, and
Right.
and then pivot into a healing journey, then it's all for the good. Even though it
Right.
was horrible what's happened, we can turn it around and not live in the misery. So I love
Right.
that so much. Thanks so much again. I adore you.
I adore you too. Thank you so much.
Remind our viewers where they can reach you.
BentonIntegrative.com.
BentonIntegrative.com.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us today. You can find me at kidsfirstforever.com, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Good morning, Children's Health Defense. I am delighted that we have here as our guest today Jan Jekielek, best-selling author, filmmaker, who's been working with our friends at Epic Time for over 20 years. He is the senior editor and host of the show American Thought Leaders. Jan, welcome to CHD TV.
Mary, it's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're really delighted to have you here. I was just saying to you that I can't say that I enjoyed reading your book, but I think it's a critically important book, Killed to Order. And I want us to talk about this program that you have described in painstaking detail about the organ harvesting program that is really industrialized in China, and particularly being exacted against political prisoners, effectively, people in Falun Gong, Uyghurs, although it may have started, based on the book, with criminals who are facing the death penalty. But I'd like for you to tell our audience first about the scale of this, why you wrote this book. It must have been a very difficult book to write. Just it is, in effect, it's a difficult book to read.
Mary, about 20 years ago, I got hit over the head, I like to say, with the evidence about something that I really didn't want to believe. And we knew that in communist China, they were actually killing people for organs at a small scale. There was actually a congressional hearing about that in 1998. And so we knew that this was possible, that we knew that they didn't appreciate the individual dignity of a human being. So it made sense that that sort of activity happened. But to think that it could be industrialized, to think that it could be large scale, that's a whole different level. And I frankly wasn't ready to believe it until a couple of whistleblowers came forth independently nearly at the same time. So that's how I got interested and how I started reporting on it. That was about 20 years ago. The toughest thing, we're talking about industrialized, large scale of killing prisoners of conscience, innocent people, basically having kind of an organ bank where the moment a Chinese super elite or someone with a lot of money, a transplant tourist comes in, there's people ready to be killed that are actually perfect matches for that person. I mean, and this is done at a scale of 60 to 90,000 transplants a year. So industrial, large scale. I mean, and when I would talk about this with people for years, it was very common for people to actually sort of leave the conversation mentally as I was describing it, because it's just so extreme. Hopefully you'll give me a chance to kind of give you a sense of the nuts and bolts of how it works. But it is very, very dark. And so something happened in the last few years, and I think that something was actually COVID. I think we got a sense of the totalitarian impulse in our own society, those of us who weren't aware that that was existing already. And also we watched things like in communist China, in their pursuit of zero COVID policy, welding people into their homes and so forth. We got a sense of what's possible over there. So I feel like the social consciousness has somehow changed. And this was actually the genesis of this book, was this realization that maybe now is finally the time when people are ready to understand this at a larger scale, because having a large portion of our population understand this is real is a major step towards ending it.
Right. And I want to just note that we have a partnership with Skyhorse Publishing, and I'm so delighted to see that Skyhorse made this book available. So tell us about the nuts and bolts. Tell us about the financial scope of this. And then I want to talk about sort of how the West is complicit in many ways. But let's start with the nuts and bolts, and how much money are we talking about?
So our estimate, and keep in mind, this is very rough, right? Because when I say 60 to 90,000 transplants a year, I think that number is a very conservative number in itself. The bounds are, but the actual numbers are hard to track because the reality is they're a state secret.
Of
So
course.
we infer this information through a
Right.
variety of different ways. How many hospitals are functioning doing
Yeah.
transplants? The fact that there really is no legitimate transplantation system, like an ethical system, like I'll describe momentarily. And a sense of what the minimum possible throughput could be of a transplant hospital and a transplant team. That's where you get these kind of numbers. That's where you get the low end of 60,000. But so that's if you do an average between 60 and 90, you get about a $9 billion annual industry. So the financial incentive is quite significant. But
Right.
I think there's something bigger here too, and this was revealed to us when Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong Un were actually in Tiananmen Square and got caught on a hot mic last year. You might remember that. They were talking about continual organ transplantation to achieve immortality. And I mean, amazingly, right? And I realized that they have this elite longevity project that I've known about for years, and I'd known about, of course, this forced organ harvesting industry for years, but it hadn't grasped somehow that this organ harvesting industry was a centerpiece of the Chinese elite longevity project. Because if you're in China, you have unlimited on-demand organs, the right organs, right? Not just random organs, but the right organs that will fit you well, available to you in perpetuity on demand. So that seems to me to be worth more than $9 billion a year if you have no moral boundaries at all.
And one of the extraordinary things that you describe in the book, Jan, is some of these medical tourists coming to China, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for transplant. But if the first one doesn't work, they bring the second one. I believe in the book, there was one example of somebody getting 10 transplanted organs, which is just a horrifying thought.
No, exactly. And even fairly recently, in 2020, we have a case where someone was fitted with 4 hearts within a period of 10 days. That's things like that are actually possible if you can pay the money. And that's, by the way, why I call it killed to order, right? I call it a killed to order transplant industry. But
Yeah.
let's go back something, Bobby Kennedy Jr., of course, extremely familiar to
Known to
Children's Health
PhD,
Defense.
yes.
The secretary of HHS, he recently announced
Yes.
he's decertifying another transplant system in America. And the reason these things, one of the big reasons why you would decertify a transplant system is because it becomes too flexible in terms of actually taking organs from someone that isn't really dead. And so it's really important to understand that it's a very difficult thing, organ transplantation in an ethical society. And even that has its own problems. Like let's say I need a new heart. Okay, that is a vital organ. Of course, someone giving their heart doesn't survive that. So you need to have a catastrophic accident.
Right.
Typically, it's a car accident or a motorcycle accident. And that person also can't be fully dead. If there's no more circulation for any significant period of time, those organs degrade really quickly. They're not good anymore for transplantation. So it has to be a very specific kind of accident. And then that ethics team comes in and says, hey, is this person really dead? Does this person have a chance of coming back? If they have a chance, right, we can't take organs from someone like that. That would be horrible, right? That would be killing someone for organs. And so this is actually a difficult decision that this team has to make. And there's a tension between there because there's people wanting more on the side of procuring the organ, and there's people more on the side of making sure that you're absolutely not making that mistake, right, of actually
Right.
killing someone for an organ. So once that process goes through, now you also have to match for blood type and tissue type because our bodies reject foreign things, including organs, right? And then we also have to match the size. You can't put a giant heart into a small person and so forth. So all this together, right? There's an algorithm that is now used to decide who gets to the top of the line when this when this donor appears because of this accident that happens, right? And there's this big group of people that are waiting. The supply is always a lot less than the demand in an ethical system. And that's what creates this really perverse incentive structure for organ trafficking as it's done with the cartels, or this very more extreme version, this kill to order trafficking that happens in communist China. So the way it works there is almost like the exact reverse of how it works in an ethical system. And let me explain what I mean by that, and a little bit of background too, okay? So in communist China, and frankly, in any totalitarian state to some degree, but in communist states, there's this history, in communist China especially, history of creating what are called class enemies, black classes. Okay, the first, to illustrate that, the first one was landowners. They wanted to seize private property. They were going to make all the property of the people, right? Really, of the Communist Party, the animals that are more equal than others, so to speak. But that was the plan. But you can't just go and take people's stuff. You know, they've earned it, they've worked hard for it, or they've inherited it, and they have friends who support them. So you know, kind of alienate a massive portion of the population, right? But what you can do, and this is one of the reasons why communist societies or communist parties always seize all of the information dissemination mechanisms in a society, because now you can use that to push mass propaganda, target that group, and dehumanize them systematically through repetition. I mean, very similar to what happened in the 1930s in Germany against the Jewish people.
Right.
And so they basically, what they said about the landowners is they're evil people. They took it from you, you deserve it back. They're dangerous people, you should hold them in contempt. And they just kept pushing all sorts of messaging that would reinforce that idea, thereby conditioning the population, right? Of course, not everyone entirely believes this, right? But the population gets conditioned to think it's okay to do something, bad things to these people because they're somehow bad, right? And a lot of we're susceptible to this kind of conditioning, and I think the COVID years actually showed us. I had no idea how susceptible we were to this
Yeah.
kind of conditioning, right, until the COVID years. So basically, that's what happens. And there's been many of these groups. And remember, they control the entire system, information system.
Right.
So they
Sure.
did that to many groups, you know, landowners, intellectuals,
Right.
rightists, as they called them, towards the end of the student movement in '89, the
Yeah.
students.
Students.
And then in 1999, it was Falun Gong
Awesome.
practitioners.
Yeah.
And just a little bit about Falun Gong. There's a unique aspects of Falun Gong practitioners that I think, that set up the scenario where the regime could do kill to order.
Yeah.
It's not your typical organization that as you would think. It's a spiritual discipline. It's a meditation, slow motion exercise system, kind of like a Chinese yoga with, you know, thousands of years of history. And it's unusual as an organization is that there's voluminous teachings about how to implement truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance in your life. These are the core principles that people live. The idea is that you have to live those things, and that actually manifests in your body as physical health as well. And what there isn't is there aren't a lot of rules, okay? And the rules would be something like, for example, you can't enrich yourself in any way from the practice, from doing it. Or another one would be that there's no worship of Li Hongzhi, who's the founder who wrote the teachings for Falun Gong. Another one would be that there's actually no hierarchy in the system. There's no kind of priest class or anything remotely like this. You don't even join anything. What makes you a Falun Gong practitioner is living it. There's no roster or anything like that. And when you add all of this up, right, from my perspective, one, it's a system that is probably difficult to fit into a communist society, which is, I like to describe it as obscenely hierarchical. And Mary, from your work, I know you know this very well, how hierarchical these systems can be.
Yeah.
And the other part is, I think that it fosters an unusual level of agency in people.
Yeah.
The point being that when people become practitioners, there's no sort of incentive for them to do this other than them really wanting to, basically,
Yeah.
or at least that's
Yeah.
minimized as much as possible, right? So now you have throughout the 90s, Falun Gong grows massively. And by the end of the 90s, we have 70 to 100 million Falun Gong
Amazing.
practitioners, you know, by some rough government estimate, right? Which, of course, you have to take all Chinese statistics
Sure.
with a massive grain of salt, but they thought it was massive. That's what they were saying. They were saying it's bigger than the Communist Party of China. And so they decided to crack down on it, basically eradicate it, to use the words of the dictator. And the Falun Gong became the first group, I think, in this history of creating these black classes or political enemies that actually resisted this process. Because if you could, going back to the landowners, if you professed that landowning was indeed evil, as the regime talked about, you said, yes, thank you, great Communist Party, for emancipating me from my beliefs in private property or whatever, right? If you did this, you might live, right? You sort of supplicate yourself in front of the party. But the Falun Gong at scale refused to do this. They said, no, we're not evil, right?
Right.
Sometimes you'll see these people in yellow shirts
Yeah.
handing out flyers at train stations or in big public places, tourist sites, and so forth. Often they'll wear Falun Gong is good or Falun Dafa
Yeah.
is good. That was Falun Gong's response to
Yeah.
being called evil. And the regime absolutely would not tolerate this because their position is, I am the truth, right? If I say it, that is the truth. And so this caused this unusual situation where they decided to start incarcerating them en masse. And
Yeah.
I think this is what actually set up this
Yeah.
kill to order possibility, because you had this population, one, massively dehumanized through successive repetitive propaganda,
Yeah.
two, mass incarcerated, million plus, maybe 2 million plus. We don't even know the exact number, but massive numbers. The State Department in 2005 said most or half of all the people in their re-education through labor system were Falun Gong practitioners. Just to give an example, in China, China's re-education through labor system. So this is what they did. They started blood typing, tissue typing, and
Right.
organ scanning these people, incarcerated people,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And now, if I'm this very loose moraled transplant tourist and I've got 200 grand to pay, the moment I give it over, I make that transaction, my so-called donor, okay, and is actually an innocent person incarcerated in this kind of organ bank in China. And the perfect match exists because there's so many people that have been typed in the system, and then that person is killed to order so that I can live. That's why I call my book "Killed to Order."
It's frightening. And I think you also describe, Jan, how the bodies of the involuntary donors are cremated so that the evidence is destroyed, but that a critical whistleblower was somebody for whom they only took a piece of an organ and he lived. And so there was tangible proof. There was no question that this was going on. And in fact, you write that the story was confirmed because China acknowledged that he'd had the surgery, but they said it had been voluntary and all kinds of nonsense. But I want to focus a little bit on what is the role of the United States? What are the implications of the program in the Netherlands and in Canada where the state is involved in euthanasia? Is this a risk for the rest of the world? Or could we just say, oh, well, that's China and we don't have to worry about it?
Well, as a starting point, this is the case I make in the book. We went out and said to ourselves, or at least this was the huge messaging that was going on for 30, 40 years, right? That we're going to pump a lot of cash into communist China. And through that process, we're going to change them. We're going to turn them into a Taiwan or a South Korea or, Japan or something like this, right? I think what really happened was the reverse. They changed us. So as you well know, I mentioned that they do not, in a communist society, notably in the under the Chinese Communist Party, the individual dignity of a human being, that concept. Of course, there are people in China who believe in that for various reasons, but the system does not. The system rejects it entirely, right? And people are essentially kind of a fodder that exists for as long as it's for the survival and the supremacy of the party. If having people live and flourish, of course there's some level of that has to happen, that's great. But if people need to be killed in some scale or whatever, if there's danger to the party, anything goes. Absolutely anything goes. And I think, we've had this rise in the scientific literature, in the ethics literature in America. There's been this rise of what we call utilitarian bioethics, right? That's the greatest good for the greatest number type, an ethical approach to treating human beings or helping them. That's in stark juxtaposition to the traditional Hippocratic approach where I treat you as an individual. If I'm going to treat you in some way, I have to minimize the harm, that do no harm mantra, right? And everything I do is for your personal benefit as much as possible. In this utilitarian view, as you move towards the extreme version of it, right? It's basically, it's okay to sacrifice people if it's indeed for the greater good of the society. And in communist societies, and this only really dawned on me as I was writing, the greatest good is the survival and supremacy of the Communist Party. So it's no surprise that you get mass atrocities in these societies every single time. My point here is that we've kind of shifted into this more utilitarian way of thinking, from a Hippocratic way of thinking about medicine. So now, to answer your question directly, when we're talking about euthanasia programs, what they call MAID in Canada, I don't know what they call it in the Netherlands, but you pointed out these programs are actually in many states and so forth, but in Canada and Netherlands, they're unique. And what makes them unique is that it's essentially, the procedure is a billing code. It functions as a kind of a treatment that you would give. And, this is sort of the antithesis of Hippocratic medicine, right? Because if do no harm is the centerpiece of Hippocratic medicine, this is like the ultimate harm, right? But the argument is, well, if it's someone really wants it, it's okay for a doctor to become a killer. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean, literally, the doctor is killing the person. The question more is, are they a murderer? Or those kind? That's where the ethical questions come in. But you can imagine this situation, right? There's examples now where people have their organs sort of prearranged for donation, right? And in the calculus of utilitarian bioethics, this makes a ton of sense, right? Because there's not enough organs out there, and people, they don't want to live anymore, so why not have them donate their organs to as many people as possible. This is good for society, good for everybody. The problem is that this road to thinking about human beings as parts is losing that sense that the individual human dignity is kind of the highest value, if you will, is a very, very dark road that, to me, I'll just quote Joseph Stalin, right? To make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs. So many people have heard that, right? That's actually utilitarian bioethics personified. And that's what you end up getting. And what I'm worried about is, I can imagine commercials even in place. And this, Canada's my home country, right? Where people will be saying, remember, the incentives are so perverse, right? The Canadian medical system is in a state of collapse. It's been kind of milked dry, and people wait months for basic procedures. It's a system that's in very, very rough shape. And of course, the majority of that cost is older people, right? And so if you can reduce that cost, the system would be, extremely happy to see that. And in this utilitarian view of the world, right? Well, doesn't it make sense to help reduce that excess population, especially those people that don't seem to want to live? And at the same time, if, let's say, you're someone that's living alone, right? You're having a tough time. Your kids don't really, they're doing their own thing. You don't really feel needed anymore. Now you can actually, do something meaningful, give the gift of life to someone that needs it, right? You can imagine people being cajoled this way. And in Canada, even, they have these people called death doulas. I don't know if that's the official term, but it's a term, right? Where they encourage people. There was even an example of a Catholic priest who had a pretty serious hip injury, if I recall, was in a lot of pain. And this death doula came to him and said, "Hey, listen, can I offer you, can I offer you MAID? Can I offer you euthanasia as a solution to your problem?" Right? And he said, "This is against my faith. Can you please not come to me again?" I'm paraphrasing here, right? But she kept coming back to him. He took serious offense at this, right? Now, maybe and this is the paradox, right? For someone that really believes this stuff, right? But kind of indoctrinated into this utilitarian thinking, she might actually be thinking, I'm doing something really good for this person. They just don't realize how the good I'm trying to offer them, right?
Yeah. But we follow this, and already in the Netherlands and in Canada, we've seen examples of very young people under 15 who are being euthanized. And it's such a slippery slope. They don't need parental permission under, at a certain age. And it's just they're very perverse incentives, right? Somebody's having a bad day, they're depressed, they sign the piece of paper, they're 13, they have the permission, and that's that. And their organs can be sold for a lot of money and take one person off the Social Security rolls.
Now,
it's not hard to see the incentives for governments that are struggling financially, which will be most of our governments very, very soon, if not already. So
Right. No, and I was going to say that some of these things are always kind of testing the limits. I think those cases that you're examining, I think many people, that are sort of pro that industry will say, "Oh no, we don't do that sort of thing. That's not normal. That maybe, or maybe if there is a case, it kind of came through the cracks." But we've been galloping towards a much more permissive system. I mean, it's become the #4 cause of death in Canada, from what I understand, right? Which is just kind of
Shocking.
astonishing. You have heart
Yeah.
disease, these really kind of major
Yeah.
killers. And I think so part of Kill to Order, right? This is sort of the apotheosis, or the
Yeah.
extreme version, if you might imagine, where you're getting to, right? Of course,
Yeah.
in this is the thing, like, no, I hopefully there are very few people who think it's okay to kill innocent people, actively kill innocent people for organs, right? But that we're on that road. I don't think what Canada and Netherlands
Right.
and frankly states and others that are supporting assisted suicide, we're not there. It's not the same. Some
No.
people say it's
No.
the same. It's not, but it's heading us into this very deep, dark, uber utilitarian view.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many other topics I want to address, but I don't want us to go too long, at least in this sitting. Is there anything else that you absolutely want to make sure our audience knows about the book and about, your message here?
Well, the number one thing is at killedtoorder.com. That's a short link to the Amazon link. Of course, if you don't like Amazon, you can maybe get it for your local library or get it in a store, order it if it's not there. I just encourage you to get the book. A big part of it isn't just about the forced organ harvesting industry, but it's about the mentality of the regime. Right. And this is actually quite important because I think we're a little bit naive still in terms of how we deal with communist China. And I'm trying to help people understand that. But at the back, if you're hearing all this, is like, what can I possibly do that's so far away? Right. I have a whole appendix at the end of the book, which also has my email, by the way, for anyone that wants to reach out to me. Basically, I let people know there's things at the municipal, at the actually very grassroots level, municipal level, state level, federal level. All of it's in play. There's a lot we can meaningfully do, and the agencies can also do very meaningful things. And so I've started discussing with a number of them around this as well. And if you want to see what you can do, what is being done, it is a bit of a renaissance in trying to address this issue. We've seen some substantive changes. Check it out. It's not all darkness. There's hope in this, but it's really one of the biggest atrocities that exist in our society today. And I think it's very important that we face it head on.
Yeah, it's an excellent book, and I really encourage everyone watching to buy a copy and to read it. It's easy to read, it's not too long, and it's an extraordinary thing to think that innocent people are being killed for their organs and used as spare parts, essentially. So, yeah, and thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Mary, I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you and your work.
Thank you.
Leslie Perdomo.
I'm Jay Perdomo.
And this is your boy.
It's my
This
boy
is
Jason.
And he's the youngest of three. So who else have you got?
We have a 13-year-old, soon to be 14. His name is Justin. Then we have an 11-year-old Joshua, and then Jason, who's 9.
When did you see his injury? At what age?
We started seeing his injury at 3 years and 4 months. He received his MMR vaccine at 3 years, 2 months. So we started seeing a difference.
Okay, so
After
then
that's
late.
That's very
So
late.
now describe him to us, because you would have got some
Yeah.
talking, walking.
Yes.
Oh,
Tell us
Yes.
about it.
He met all his milestones, walking, talking. He was learning his letters and sounds. He actually learned them faster than our soon-to-be 4-year-old, and we were wondering if he was going to have a hard time at school since he was already ahead of him. He learned Spanish quickly.
Spoke English, Spanish.
Spoke English and Spanish, new songs.
Have you got video of this?
We have very small videos. The third child doesn't get a lot.
We do have some, though.
Others,
We
but we do have some. But we started noticing his regression happened slowly. We started noticing his behavior is the first thing that changed. Well, first he got sick. He got a fever. He had a rash. We gave him Tylenol like they told us to do. And then we started noticing that his behavior was changing. He started becoming extremely hyperactive, and this was the calmest child of all three. He started becoming fearful of things that he never feared. He started getting anxiety.
He would tell you, "I'm scared, Dad. I'm scared."
He would, at this point,
He'd point to
tell
something I'm
us
scared about.
that he was scared of certain things, but then it wasn't until 6 months later that he actually started not answering to his name, and he started not repeating what you wanted him to say. He would say sometimes just random phrases, but it wasn't the same as before. So then we did the whole testing through the school system, and by then we had already taken him to the pediatrician, his pediatrician who knew him from birth, and they had ruled out. They thought he was lead poisoned because his change was so drastic, and since it had happened at such a late age, it wasn't common. So they started testing him for maybe lead poisoning. They even did MRIs to see if he had a tumor. That was ruled out. We went to neurologists to see what diagnosis they would give him, and the first diagnosis we got was a possible Landau-Kleffner syndrome, which is sort of like an epilepsy.
Chronic silent seizures.
Because of how he regressed so late, they say that
Does he have
sometimes they
chronic
mimic it.
seizures?
No.
No. So one of the tests came back with some abnormalities. They redid the EEG. The first EEG said some abnormalities. The second one said no. So they kind of ruled it out, and he was just diagnosed with autism, and we just had to just deal with it and do ABA. But no one got into no one questioned this child was normal up until the age of 3, and then he started losing all these skills. No one, to this day, the mainstream doctors don't really.
They're all stumped. We've been to doctors in California, Arkansas.
Well, those are not mainstream doctors.
That's fine, but we've been to them, and they're neurologists. We've been to neurologists here at University of Miami. We've been to Tampa, and they're all stumped. I've had a doctor put his arm over me and basically say, "I'm sorry, but I have no answers for you. We don't understand how this happened. We don't understand what's going on."
But it's not the vaccine.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then they even recommended for us to check his genes.
Yeah, we did the genome test.
We did a genome test,
that
which
came back.
cost us about $15,000.
Yeah, I wouldn't waste any more money on this, guys. It's obvious this is vaccine engine. When they say they're stamped, that means that it's vaccine engine.
Exactly, they just don't want to.
And
I mean, in my son's case, it's more obvious than others. We delayed the vaccine, the MMR vaccine, and he still regressed.
after the fact.
After the fact.
Which is like I say, I always say it's my fault because I remember her going to the doctor and
he was talking on that day. He and his brother were talking about
they were having fun with
the drawings on the walls.
the surfer on the wall.
Yeah, and they were making funny comments about it. And
she called me and asked me, "Hey, should I give it to her? They're giving us a hard time at school." And I told her at the time that all the research that I had read said that after 3 he was fine. So I basically told her, hey, I think everything that I've read seems like it's okay. We're past that point. And we had already spoken about this before because, being a parent and being teachers of children that are autistic or special needs, that's one of the scariest things there are. So I remember her and I, talking about it and giving each other a hug and saying, wow, thank God we're past this point. He's reading, he was doing all his shapes and speaking English, Spanish. We thought,
even the
everything was great.
teachers who had him in the preschool that had him just months before he got his vaccine, and then after, now in the fall, they would just observe him from the other class, and they just couldn't believe the change. They were asking us what's going on. He's not social anymore. He doesn't want to participate in anything. He's scared of balloons and things that he wasn't scared of before.
The day that it really hit me was the day I went to pick him up at preschool, and he's usually the talkative kid with the sits at the teacher's table and they eat in the morning, and he's having fun and talking and singing along. And he would always tell me or tell us which kids got in trouble at school.
He would.
Yeah. So there was one particular kid named Brenda, and he would always tell us, Brenda got in trouble again today. She was in timeout today. Dad, she was in timeout. And so I go pick him up that day, and I go into school, and I actually see him, not with his friends, but in a corner somewhere all by himself. And I honestly got mad being a teacher. I got really mad because I thought he was in timeout. I'm like, he's a little kid. For him to be in timeout all alone, secluded to one side. And I was actually going there to, I was upset. So when I go talk to, I try to make eye contact with him as I'm walking towards him, and he's usually the kid that runs, sees Dad, runs, says Daddy, and then jumps on me. He saw me, he didn't do anything, and then he just kept doing his, just started playing. He never stemmed before. He started stemming at that time, playing with his hands. And when I went and spoke to the teacher about it, she says, no, she told me, look, he's been acting like that for a little while now. We wanted to ask you what was going on. We wanted to have a meeting with you because he was the most social, and he went from being the most social and talkative to the kid that didn't speak at all and wanted to be secluded.
So, people, this is a very important story, a very, very important story, because Vax the movie leads you to believe that it does. He leads you to believe that you'll probably be safe after 3. You are not safe after 3. There is no age you're safe with these vaccines.
Well, we learned that the hard way.
We have moved on.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
This is a tragic, and they're all tragic, all these stories, but
the kids, the people that knew him before and they haven't seen him in years, when they see him, they can't believe it's the same child. They just stare at him and stare and stare. And
I've had people ask me, did he have a stroke? Did something else happen? Because they don't understand. We had some friends that went to Mexico and came back 2 years later, and their kids and our kids are exactly the same. They have 3 girls, we have 3 boys, and they're exactly the same ages. And when they came back, they just couldn't believe it. They thought something else happened. They kept asking us, well, did you go to the doctor? Yeah, we've been everywhere. And they just could not believe it.
you must be furious.
Yeah. Well, his buddy was the middle child. They're only 2 years apart exactly. And for the first 2 years, he would say, Mommy, when is Jason coming back? It's like he left. He would say that. Now he's used to it because it's been 6 years almost. But for the little bit of time, he was like, when is Jason coming back? When he was first diagnosed by the school psychologist for the county, and he got the diagnosis from the doctor. He had just turned 4, so we went from a year almost within all the testing and all the evaluations and the different doctors. And then when he started preschool at the age of 4, right after his evaluation, he was diagnosed with autism. The psychologist, same thing came out in the school psychologist evaluation. He spoke. He was in preschool and he spoke. He wouldn't have conversation, but you would ask him to repeat something and he would actually say it. His teacher would even comment on how well his enunciation was. And then he started losing that too. He started losing his speech little by little. He started changing sounds around. And the teacher was concerned. She's like, he's putting a T after each word. I don't understand why he's doing that. He used to. And this happened in a matter of months. And then, like, the year later, he would only say, I want, follow, like, a command. Or if you wanted something, follow, a scripted sentence. And then a year, like 2 years ago, is when he lost it completely.
It was really weird at the beginning. And being that, again, in the school setting, we had resources that we could go to. I would go to the speech pathologist at our school and talk to her about it and tell her, because he started saying everything with a T sound towards the end. Mm-hmm. So he would say, Mommy, Daddy, and everybody was stumped. They didn't understand. We didn't understand. We went to the doctor. They didn't understand. But it was a weird progression as it went. And it got to the point where regression. And then finally, we also had another weird stage where whenever he would get sick, he would start getting better It was like a roller coaster ride.
So when he got fever and stuff.
Yes,
yeah,
he would
I've heard
actually
this
get
before.
better
Yeah.
and start talking to us. And we thought, oh man, we praised God, thinking, it was just a phase, and he's out of it, he's back, and then all of a sudden he would get better, and once he got better from his fever or from the flu or whatever it was, he would go back to where he is now.
Some say it's that when they have fevers and stuff, they don't really eat anything, and the minute you start putting food back into them, they start
I think
to go
so too.
crazy. Food is such
Because
a
we
big
doesn't
problem.
eat in a long time. I see that he's calmer, and he's more with us. So I agree with that.
It was so everyone was stumped, and then little by little again he started losing it until he finally lost it about 2 years ago. And the last thing he said was, I love you, Dad.
It's such a cool thing. This vaccine interest is so cool. What it does to our children.
So we have some video of him talking. We had one from Easter about 3 years ago, maybe a little further back, where he was already going through his transition, but he was happy because we were going to church that day, and he knew he was going to get Easter eggs with candy. So he's bringing up, Dad, we're going to Easter, we're going to church. It's Easter, and he was really happy. And, we found that on an old phone that my wife had. They were going to throw him out, and I said, hey, let me just look at that because. To see what was in it, and that's when I found it, and we noticed a real big regression. It's like once you live it, you kind of get numb to it and don't notice it. And we're thinking, man, this is a year exactly today. He was talking so much, and now he doesn't say anything at all. And
would you be able to send us that footage so we can cut it into this film we're making?
definitely, I'll have to
It's
bring
really
it off the phone.
important that we show that these children were okay before as much as we can.
And his teacher would, every once in a while, she would send something at the time when she would get him to talk a little bit. This is way after the fact through WhatsApp.
Right.
And she remember
That was after.
that was way after the fact. But then since then, there hasn't really been anything.
How do your other two sons cope with it? Because it's really hard on siblings.
Yeah,
Really
they
hard
are
on
so
siblings.
helpful, and they're so compassionate. They know they have to help, and they know that he's the brother. They're very, very involved, and they hope to help us with this journey. I forgot to tell you, Joshua said, I'm going to invent a medicine that will make all kids well again. So they're really into finding what's
wrong,
and he remembers. He's like, Mom, I remember the lady that gave him the shot. It was her fault.
He remembers that day. 'Cause
Yeah,
they both
I
got
remember
it.
the lady that gave him the shot. It was her fault. So
He's right, it is her fault. She should have done her job better and looked at the insert.
look at the inserts.
Yeah. They got more affected than you would. You can tell. Jason, don't touch that. I'm sorry.
I know he's trying to be patient.
They don't. Again, you can't really see it much, but they've lost out on a lot because we've had to spend so much money and we've had to do so much because obviously it's your child and you do the best you can. But they all play baseball and football, and I used to coach them. He was actually in t-ball, and was playing t-ball. That's when we had to pull him out because after the shots, it was.
Yeah, I started noticing a change. I'm like, he can't handle it.
he-
He would get scared with the whistle, the coach's whistle, and I remember crying that day.
Yeah, he was.
Like,
Remember, he was in the Yankees.
He couldn't.
He was in the Yankees, and he had the little uniform stuff, and he had been there before. He'd played before. Everything was fine. Then once we came back, he was just non-existent, and the coaches were worried, because he just forgot to do everything. To hit, to swing, to run to the
He forgot
base.
to ride a bicycle. He knew how to ride a bicycle.
He forgot that.
So-
He used to get dressed on his own. We would put it there, and he would get dressed on his own. That was done. Funny thing is, he used to when he first started going through the whole progression or the regression. He used to mock me in the mornings, and I would get mad at him because I would tell him, "Stop jumping, stop jumping." He started jumping. So then he would start skipping around the room and say, he'd look at me and laugh and say, "Stop jumping, stop running, stop
Because
stop
I knew you were
screaming."
gonna say it.
So he would skip around.
Have you stopped going to that pediatrician?
Yes.
Definitely.
Have you been back to see that pediatrician?
He
No,
retired.
he retired.
I bet he did. Fast he could.
He retired, and because of what we've been through, like they don't question us on why we don't want to vaccinate the other ones. You know, because of the other vaccines that they have to get, so they don't question us.
They know. I mean, the day I took him, he canceled all his schedule. He looked at me, he saw him, and he said, when did this start happening? I said,
And
I
still,
don't
he
know.
won't admit.
He still
would
won't admit
never
it.
admit, even years after, because he just retired like
But
recently.
he cleared his schedule. He called his nurse out, and this is a famous, I don't want to say the pediatric
The
place,
chain
but
of-
it's a very famous chain. And he called his nurse and said, "Cancel my schedule for the rest of the day." It was in the morning. And he got on the phone, he said, and he was frightened. He told me, "Listen, I really think your son has gotten poisoned somehow." And he asked me about pica. He asked me about all these things. I
They
said,
didn't
"Well,
consider the vaccines. They didn't look at the fact that the MMR vaccine was given later. And let's take a look at what is different in this case. What did we do that wasn't on schedule that might be a trigger, a cause? They didn't. So they, went through that route thinking that he had
they thought it was poisoning." So
tumor.
he immediately called the children's hospital and had a friend, a neurologist there, and had him get checked that very same night. Get checked for toxicity or some toxic poisoning that he might have put in his mouth, which is what his theory was.
Anything but the vaccine.
Exactly.
That was not mentioned.
Then when that came out negative, he called me in and spoke to me and told me to get my family ready and get my wife ready because he was 100% sure he had a brain tumor. He says, he told me there's no way that he could change so fast. Because he's seen him since he was born, and he just saw him a few months before for the vaccine. So
No,
he knew.
he wasn't there the day of the vaccine.
But he
was there.
I took him 2 days before that for some reason or other, and then he knows my kids. So for him to see that, he told me, "Well, go get your wife ready because this has to be a tumor. There's no way that he could change from one kid to what he is now." So I had to go home and talk to her and talk to her family, try to just calm him down, and they went and did an MRI on him, and that came out negative also.
Now, have we written his name on the bus?
No.
Should we go and do it?
Yes.
Please.
You guys spoke about it really well. I think if I was to ask you what advice you'd give to other parents, it's obvious what you're going to say.
Definitely.
Definitely not vaccinate.
Nope.
There you go.
There's-
Definitely not vaccinate. Your kids are not cookie cutters, and you don't know what can happen. And
There's a big fat
if there's
lie.
a chance, then you don't want to risk it.
You know what? The doctor that saw him in California said, "You know what? It's in the United States, in a civilized country, you can get measles, mumps, and rubella and live perfectly well with them. You can't return from autism at this point. So why submit your kids to it?"